Please imagine a tall, green-skinned woman with long, jet-black hair. She wears an amauti, a parka for mothers to carry their children upon their back in a small pouch, her hands outstretched as if waiting for you to give her something. Her bones crack as she whispers something into the chill breeze of northern Canada, and her webbed toes smack against the stone ground as she approaches you. Now please imagine a tundra, where snow stretches in every direction, leading to massive hills of blank land. A few bits of gray stone mark your way to the igloo you have made for yourself, where a small fire is waiting for you and your child. The winds howl with a chilling bite, sending goosebumps up your back, and you can't help but look back on where you trotted away from your temporary home. Your fears were pushed away so that you could live another minute in ignorance, but you feel now is the best time to finally come to terms with your decision. The Pacific Ocean covers the horizon, and you fall to your knees. You have plenty of food to survive, much more than you need. You and your child would be fine, or at least that was the deal. You were so afraid that you'd starve. You just wanted to feed them, keep them protected. They were only 2 years old, just barely enough to walk to start their journey, and you gave them away. It would only be for the fall season, you told her. Only for the season, she told you. Her voice raspy, filled with an evil you had known, but chose to ignore. Her own amauti was well worn, as if it had been passed down to hundreds of mothers to care for their children. She placed your child in the hood on her back, something your child no doubt felt comfortable in. They were asleep at the time, and as the woman walked into the waters with her long black toenails clacking against the gray stone, walking into the cold brine to wherever her kind dwelled, you knew you wouldn't have your child back. We at the Coalition must travel to find answers to life's burning questions. This is all for you, dear listener, and especially for those who have kept their noses to the Black Index. One question that is brought up now and again by inquiry staff is thus: was there always evil? Questions such as these tend to be thrown into the bin. We aren't here to answer philosophical questions, but more impermanent ones. Why was this building abandoned? Why are these streets covered in sigils drawn with chalk and blood? Why are there whispers coming from the forest? Is this a curse or merely a sickness? These are all basic questions, but trust me when I say inquiry staff are very thorough. On this day, we will be attempting to answer the question most ignored by the rest of the Coalition: was there always evil? By analyzing what many children call a boogieman, but we at the Coalition call a novel manifestation. Belief goes together with humans just as assuredly as the universe will end with a whimper, and no one's belief is more powerful than that of a child. Today, we will be looking at the Qalupalik of Inuit myth, a boogeyman to keep you from going off the beaten path. The story we related to you at the beginning of this recording is an incident involving one of our junior staff, a miss when she had lost her child to the ocean depths. She had given us permission to tell her story so that others may not make the same mistake as her. If you followed along with us, your Black Index should be on page 441, where we see an illustration of a figure swimming up from the depths. The illustration was donated to the Texas Society and Museum of the Fascinating and Weird. It was said to have been donated by the sister of a man who succumbed to his wounds while in the Alaskan wilderness. The woman's name was Miller. The Millers decided to take it upon themselves to escape from the world for just 1 week. The sister was apparently finding her job as a real estate developer particularly maddening, and the brother was finding his college degree in applied mathematics didn't lead him anywhere beyond the classroom, which he sorely underestimated as merely just a way station for another better-paying job. From what we can tell as the Coalition, his body was never found, and all we have to go off of are a series of interviews that can be read at the museum. The Coalition tends to have to search the depths of libraries, town information centers, police records, or websites no longer accessible to the common blogger just to find a single quote or picture linking to such perplexing events. But in this case, it seemed as if the research was already done for us. As you listen further, you will hear just how wrong we were in our assumptions. In these documents, the woman details an event that occurred in 2014, where her and her brother were alone in the Alaskan wilderness near
Anchorage
Forest through a company that specialized in backpack travel in the snowy tundra. We looked up the company, and not only does it no longer exist predictably after this event occurred, but looking back on the website when it was live, we read that you were granted a survival partner that guided you through the best spots of the Alaskan wilderness. It wasn't just her and her brother, they had someone else with them. Based on the rest of the document, she recounts that they were both approached by a tall, spindly figure with green skin, long jet black hair, and black fingernails crawling from a pool of water that apparently connected to a river and then the ocean. It attacked her brother, dragging him to the icy waters where he was never seen again. After that, she says that she walked back to the cabin they had rented and flew back to her hometown where she told her family of his passing, but replacing the information on just how he had died with a bear attack. At the Black Index, we strive for consistency. That's why when we find something out of place, we tend to look deeper than perhaps we should. There's only so much a team of well-lived individuals can learn from a situation like this. However, the further we dug, the more we realized it was best to keep digging. Retracing their footsteps, we found that they had set themselves up in a small hotel in Anchorage before moving on to the wilderness. It was there they had found the company that promised a once-in-a-lifetime hike. Now, the company was defunct, and most, if not all, of its internal files destroyed. For what reason, we can only make assumptions. It was here that our field researchers were stumped until they found a brochure detailing a variety of packages for different treks. Based on the information given by the sister during your interviews, they were able to narrow down the trail leading to... The trail had led them to a large glade surrounded by snowy mountains and thick forests of pine trees. At the center of the glade was a simple cabin, the inside ransacked and parts of the outer walls charred as if someone had attempted to burn down the building, but failed. Nearby, a shallow river flowed through the glade, branching off into the forest and connecting to the Pacific. The field researchers stayed in the glade for the night, since it had taken nearly all day to get there in the first place. They set up a tent within the cabin, the freezing night of the Alaskan wild best avoided. It was then that our team had heard the hums. They were coming from somewhere deep within the forest towards the ocean, as if it were following upon the river. None of them were very enticed by the noise, but considering what we suspected was out there, this was not a surprise. The Qalupalik entices children with their soothing siren calls, and those grown enough to know the dangers of such noises are only drawn to them when they are in need of the Qalupalik, despite knowing she can give nothing of value without first taking what is most precious to them. The field researchers sent out had no real connections to each other for this reason. They wouldn't want what the Qalupalik could give. With this in mind, we're already able to come to a couple conclusions. If Miller is telling the truth, then her brother was drawn to the creature. What exactly the Qalupalik offered to him is anyone's guess, but we know he's dead. So perhaps it's as simple as the brother being at fault here for allowing his mind to wander. Perhaps his sister's at fault. Now there's a question the team pondered for over a few weeks as they were on this case. There wasn't enough information to go off of in Alaska, so they took their journey elsewhere to the Miller household. Secrets can be kept hidden between two people if one of them is dead. But sometimes that isn't enough. The average human can barely hold themselves together when they hear gossip. What happens if it's more than simple he said, she said? Something more detrimental. Well, the mind tends to slip. People retract themselves from the world, become engulfed in the stains they've either managed to cause or have seen and were unable to clean. Miss Miller could not be found for questioning, but we have a couple dots we've managed to put together about her disappearance. Through ample investigation into her life, we found that their family were typical, although silent to the outside world. They never really talked to their neighbors, and the kids were homeschooled. To say they had a sheltered life would be an understatement. Talking with their parents was like trying to break down a concrete wall with a spoon. Their house was covered in random garbage, from newspapers and plastic cups to silverware and bicycle pumps. They were hoarders, and when we had made mention of any problems in the family that might have caused their daughters to disappear, They told us to leave. The fact that they took us for an interview was a miracle in itself, but despite being thrown out, the coalition was able to figure out something. First and foremost, the family used to live in Alaska. Second, the family, while white in complexion, did live with some of the Inuit people of the area. They were brought into the fold for reasons we were unable to parse. Third and last, they moved away from Alaska to get away from the cold. However, based on how they answered, it didn't seem as if that were the case. Listening to our researchers' recounts of the interview, it was clear to them that they were uneasy, usually jumping around subjects instead of directly answering them. Before leaving, the crew was able to make note of the home. Around the living room, on the bookshelves, tables, and walls were covered in protective sigils from a couple dozen different religions and beliefs. It was clear that they were hiding something and they didn't want anything to do with it. But they were also willing to take an interview if only to clear their name. They didn't want to be a part of the situation anymore, and they were willing to do what it took to make sure that would happen. Or perhaps we're just jumping to conclusions. The coalition doesn't tend to stop its research until most answers are given, but in this case, we have nothing much else to go off of. It was as if Miss Miller no longer existed, and her parents wanted nothing to do with the matter. This is where we leave it off to you. If you have any information regarding Miller, please contact us in our typical manner, by letter. It appears that we aren't as close to the answer of our initial question as we wanted today. Has evil always existed? Hard to say, but we at the Coalition are digging for answers daily. Novel manifestations like the Qalupalik originated from stories told to children to stop them from moving off the right and narrow path. But what exactly does it mean when this also affects adults? Is it less of a learning experience and more of learned behavior? Survival makes up the backbone of most of our decisions in life. So when we tell stories to ward off people from making the wrong decisions, we make those stories in some way a reality. We have a rough idea for when the Qalupalik manifested into reality. It has been told generation after generation in stories and art to people in the cold north. At some point or another, children and adults really started disappearing into deep waters, dragged into foreboding waves, their screams never heard as they were pulled below to the inky depths. There's a reason why we call them novel manifestations. It's because stories like these make up a reality we aren't always attuned to. But when we are, life tends to take a turn into something new. The Qalupalik is best avoided at all costs. If you find yourself at the end of your rope or searching for answers in stories told to you around campfires, you might be best to block it all out. But if you do decide to go along the path padded with embers, I guess the Coalition will just have another mystery to investigate.